Welcome back viewers, ladies, gentlemen, non-binaries and anyone with ears or other sound detection organs. Hope you enjoy. We are continuing with Going Native, written by Uncle Sealing. Going Native, Chapter 74. The sound of zippers brought Chandler out of his agonized stupor. The horrible pressure that had surrounded him loosened slightly. "All right, we're in the clear for now." Derek's voice was calm, like this sort of clandestine work was just another day at the office for him. "This next part is really going to be unpleasant. I apologize." The first sensation was the sharp sting of the medical patch being ripped from his neck. The tape being removed from his eyelids was more gentle, but Chandler was still a prisoner inside his own body. He couldn't open his eyes or do much of anything. The snick of a knife flicking open drew his attention, and, in moments, the horrible pressure holding the man's body contorted into a tight ball released. Once unfolded, Chandler laid there, unmoving, eyes closed. His even breathing gave the outward appearance of sleep, but on the inside he was screaming. The horribly static feeling of pins and needles seemed to fill his entire body, and he could do nothing about it. It was unending and he couldn't even flex his muscles to relieve the sensation. All he could do is wait for the terrible pain to ebb, which it seemed disinclined to do. "Here, one last gift for you." Chandler could feel his arm being twisted in strong hands. The sharp sting of a needle and a warm sensation seemed to flood his body, starting at the injection site and working its way out. The horrible jagged needles of pain began to dissolve into a soft fuzz of painkillers. It took perhaps another hour for Chandler to begin to move his body, and during that whole time he could feel the sensation of motion and the rumbling of an engine. Every time the vehicle hit a bump or a pothole he found himself slammed painfully down. He couldn't even brace for impact. After a time, he managed to slip his eyes open, then blinked a few times to clear everything up. He was lying down on the bed of a van, stretched out flat. Morning light surrounded him, his naked body slowly warming from the glow coming in through the curtained windows. With a truly Herculean effort, Chandler managed to raise up an arm and flex his hand. "There is a bottle of water and a change of clothes in the bag next to you. We have another 30 hours of driving yet, so take your time." By the time Chandler managed to pull himself forward and into the passenger seat of the van, he felt almost human. The t-shirt and basketball shorts kept giving him Pulp Fiction vibes, but at least he was decent. The bottle of water had turned out to be a gallon jug and he had downed most of it in a string of continuous gulps. "Where are we heading?" Derek hadn't even glanced his way when Chandler climbed up, hands at 9 and 3 on the steering wheel, eyes on the road. "New Hampshire. Your family is already there. The regional governess in Denver is gunning for you, so we're moving you completely out of her sphere of influence." "Who is we?" That question earned Chandler a smirk, but no reply. The pair sat in silence for a while, enjoying the feeling of the open road. Chandler couldn't help but ask more questions, though. He needed to know more. "How did you get me out?" "Bummed a ride to the airport from a very nice Shilvati Marine, then made a left just past the doors and rented a car instead. Drove that for a while, then ditched the rental and bought this van." "Are you hungry?" "Starving." Math had never been Ella's strong suit, but she was a bit of a party girl and her time on Earth had given her a pretty decent grasp on the strength of human alcohol. She looked at the carnage in Stace's living room with disbelief. Little help. With a start, she realized that Stace was still on the floor. He was trying to drag himself onto the couch, but between his general lack of coordination at the best of times and the staggering amount of alcohol in his system he was having trouble getting up. Ella slipped her hands under his arms and hauled him onto the seat, then sat down next to him. "What the hell were you two doing in here?" "Sperimentin'." Apparently when he was drunk Stace defaulted to rather sloppy English. Ella counted 6 large empty bottles of hard liquor. Stace and Questing for Great Truth should be in the hospital right now. Or dead. We wanted to see whose liver worked better. Course, I have a vantage. Stace leaned over conspiratorially. Turns out I'm an immoral robot. Immortal, Ella corrected. Stace slumped over towards Ella and ended up with his head in her lap. I'm not a person, so I can only get this drunk. Robot parts won't let me get drunker. Tried. You're still a person, Stace. Ella moved her hand down to play with his hair. Having some work done doesn't change that. Stace let out a little grunt, though whether he was agreeing or disagreeing Ella couldn't say. Potato came into the room and hopped up onto the couch, curling up next to the pair. With Stace taken care of and things settling down a little, Ella was able to complete her examination of the room. The coffee table was completely covered in the individual pieces of Questing for Great Truth silver prosthetic arm along with some small brushes, a bottle of lubricant, and polishing compound. Considering his previous reactions, Ella was surprised Stace wasn't in the middle of a panic attack. The alcohol probably helped. Stace? What happened to Quest's arm? There was a long delay before his response. She thought at first he might have fallen asleep. Needed maint, me ain, cleanin'. I offered I help. That was nice of you. MMH. Ella continued to stroke his hair as they sat, and it only took a few more minutes before Stace was snoring softly. She looked down at him and smiled gently. He was cute when he slept, even if he smelled like a distillery. She spent close to 15 minutes like that, just admiring her boyfriend's sleeping face. He had come a long way since his days in the Denver hospital, and she couldn't begrudge him a night of drunken debauchery such as it was. Eventually, though, her need to pee and get ready for work overcame her desire to watch him nap and she slipped free. After arranging Stace comfortably on the couch and tucking a blanket around him, she made her way to the bathroom and got ready for another day of keeping everyone safe. Commander REM's jaw was clenched so tightly that she was afraid a tooth would break. Every time she thought she had a handle on things at the painter facility some complication came up, and now there was this. She glared across her desk at Investigator Chilzer, her current pain in the cunt. It was bad enough that the interior agent had decided to claim a suite so she could visit her human bedbuddy, but this new line of Turox shit was infinitely worse. She took a moment to relax her jaw before speaking. You know, this little game of yours could easily ruin my career. I will accept full responsibility. At least Investigator Chilzer had the common decency to blush and look a little upset. You were not properly appraised of the situation in time, which was a failure on my part. That's a lie and you know it. REM took a moment to rub her temples. The cool purple steel of her right arm prosthetic helped soothe the coming headache. Regardless of how bad it looks, I'm not going to tolerate dishonesty to my military superiors. I won't lie for you. After a moment, the interior agent nodded. Then tell your superiors in the military the truth. I'll act as a buffer between you and the regional governors. And what, exactly, is the truth? Should I tell them that a pair of human spies infiltrated our research base under my nose and then managed to solicit the help of one of my soldiers so they could escape? Because that's what it looks like. No. Chilzer took a moment, her eyebrows furrowed in thought. She was half of REM's age and, like most intelligence folk, thought she was far more clever than she actually was. REM had seen a lot of Jelsi Chilzer's type come and go. Here's the truth. The investigator pulled out her Omnipod and, after a little bit of fussing, played a short audio clip. It was the regional governess, and she was ordering Jelsi Chilzer to pick up the 4 potential spies and have them all executed. Executed before performing any sort of investigation, just because it would make her look good. It was horrifying. It was also most likely a completely illegal recording, but that never seemed to bother the interior. I was not about to allow such a blatant disregard of justice and basic decency happen here. You can tell your superiors that we successfully identified the spy as one Chandler Kane. He did not obtain any useful information at this facility, but the governess's orders concerning casual executions meant that we would not be able to interrogate him. Instead, we have relocated Mr. Kane off-site and out of the governess's control, where we can observe and question him at our leisure. And how much of that is actually true? And what about the other one, Valen? The story did put the governess straight in the firing line and give REM's career some manner of protection, but there were a lot of unanswered questions. Derek Valen is, well... Investigator Chelsea flushed. Being nervous made her look even younger. He's a useful freelance asset. He has done work for us in the past and he moved the other human at our request. I have all the info on Kane's new cover identity and we are monitoring his communications. His organization is bigger than just this region, and keeping Kane alive is an important part of our continuing investigation. So Private Amal wasn't helping a human terrorist escape capture, she was aiding in relocating an intelligence asset. REM nodded, then smiled. That's something I can tell my superiors. The rotor inside the rowing machine whined as the cables were pulled back taut. Aang let out a whimper, then tried to slowly let the machine reel the handles back. They slipped out of exhausted hands and snapped loudly into place. He looked at his palms. They were sweaty, gross, and possibly even on their way to a blister. It was awful. You know, you didn't have to come with me. I love you no matter how you think you look. Merin grinned at him, then threw another combination of elbows and knees at the training ball. It was like some sort of head-sized punching bag on a big elastic band, and whenever she hit it the thing swung back at her with a vengeance. Merin simply dodged, then began another attack. You say that, but I've seen how you look at me. Aang huffed. After his months in the wilderness, he had become kinda buff. None of his clothes fit quite right, too tight across the thighs and shoulders, but it was definitely a look he could work with. Now, though, he was getting all pudgy. Too much time sitting around and he had not only lost some of the muscle definition but had put on a whole kilogram past his pre-crash weight. He felt fat and disgusting. I look at you like an adoring wife who wants nothing more than to scoop you up in her arms and make sweet, passionate love to you all day long. Merin smirked. Now, that's enough resting. Another set, this time with your back properly straight. No slouching. Aang sighed. I hate you. Love you too. The gym was empty at this time of morning. It was too late for the soldiers with morning shift, too early for the rest. It was the perfect time for Aang to not feel self-conscious. He started rowing again. This was his third set, and then Merin probably had some other torture planned for him. He never should have asked her to help him come up with an exercise plan. He knew his wife well enough to know she could get kind of intense when it came to helping with projects. He never should have married a nerd. The door clunked on the opposite side of the room and Aang turned to look over his shoulder, nearly losing his grip on the handles. He recovered, but it was still incredibly awkward. Hopefully Merin hadn't noticed. The massive purple form of Keller Chelsea entered the gym, a towel wrapped around her neck. When she noticed Aang and Merin, she smiled confidently. The woman, easily bigger than him and his wife put together, gave a small wave and made her way to the free weights. Good morning. Aang and Merin both let out a good morning of their own and Aang tried to get back in the groove of rowing. He couldn't help but watch out of the corner of his eye while Keller put disc after disc of mass onto one of the lifting bars. While he wasn't all that aware of the woman's military accomplishments, The vid series on her life had only gotten marginally good reviews and shared a time slot with a sitcom he was following at the time. He did know that she was a bit of a celebrity. That Marin didn't recognize her at first meeting is something that he was delighted to tease her about at every opportunity. In fact, do you need a spotter? I'm sure Marin would be happy to help. Ian tried to make his voice as pleasant as possible, knowing Marin would see right through it. The huge woman's lips curled up in a tusky grin. I should be okay. I'm not trying to lift my max or anything, just wake myself up a bit. If I collapse, just add a few more plates on before you call for the medics. That earned her a polite laugh from both of them. Ian, you're not trying to skip out on finishing your set, are you? Marin's face was flushed, though probably not from exertion. She was naturally pretty shy and introverted, so of course he had to point the celebrity at her. He had gotten her all flustered from Keller's attention, and now he should probably play nice. No, dear. He went back to rowing. The hotel facility had been set up like any gym, so one wall of the place was covered with mirrors and Ian could watch Keller without staring straight at her. There had to be at least 100 kilograms on the bar and she was using it for arm curls, taking all the weight on her biceps. It was fascinating. It's not polite to stare, Marin called back at him a touch too loudly. Keller's head snapped up and Ian could feel his whole face turn blue as blood rushed to it. He put his head down and focused on his rowing. However, he seemed to have lucked out. Ian wasn't the only one who seemed to have caught Keller's attention. What fighting style is that? I don't think I've seen anything quite like it. The giant's voice was polite and friendly. It's a human style, Marin called back, stopping her routine. They call it Muay Thai. I started studying it about half a year after I got here. I was starting to get a bit out of shape and I didn't want my husband, she took a moment to give him a glance, to think I was a slob. Interesting. Was it hard to find a teacher? Goddess, Keller didn't even seem short of breath. Ian felt like he was practically made of sweat. Not particularly, though I think my instructor just wanted a chance to get paid to beat on a shilvati for an hour at a time. I still managed to learn a lot. Jemsai does something similar. He has an instructor teaching him human sword fighting of all things. Still, I think you've had a better time with it. Keller's voice dropped an octave to a stage whisper that Ian and Marin could still hear quite clearly. Watching him try to swing a sword as big as him is a lot funnier than it is sexy. You, on the other hand. Keller winked and Ian had the delightful view of Marin's face blushing bright blue. This gym visit was definitely worth the muscle aches. You know, I still can't believe you kept all of these. Sammy grinned at their husband through thick lenses. On the table was a stack of wire-bound notebooks, the sort that school children have to carry from class to class. They were each battered and yellowed with age, scratches and creases marring the brightly colored covers. You told me not to lose them. Samuel smiled back, then fanned the stack out like a deck of cards. The dozen or so books displaced the other notes, diagrams, and pieces of scratch paper covering the table. Yeah, but I think we were, 12 at the time. With their left hand, Sammy grabbed a book at random from the pile. The thin, dark fingers of their right hand traced the cartoonish bubble letters in the bright green cover. Sam and Sam's big book of mad science, adorned the front cover, less drawn with pen and more carved in. One of them, and Sammy wasn't sure which, had gone over the letters again and again to make sure the ballpoint had left enough ink. In fact, one of the O's in book had completely come out, leaving a window to the first page. Underneath, someone, definitely Samuel, had used one of those little plastic letter stencil sets to add volume 6 in sharp block capitals. Sammy never would have bothered to keep track. Well, should we get started? Samuel reached under the table and pulled up a translucent plastic shopping bag. Tipping it out revealed a few new spiral notebooks, markers, crayons, and colored pencils. There were even some cheap plastic rulers. Hell yes! 20 hours of continuous brainstorming hadn't managed to find the right solution to the next problem, so now they were going to go old school. It was time to get a little bit crazy. End of chapter. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss any episode and do all the other YouTube stuff. Visit and support the author, and I'll see you next time. If you didn't enjoy, comment on what I can do better. And as usual, have a wonderful day.